This is Mikhail Tank, and this is the Archetypal Mosaic. I'm sitting in the Magical Academy of Wizard Oberon Zell, face to face, in the middle of, what is this room called?
Well, we've called it, it's really the sanctuary, but we also refer to it as the Museum of Myth, Magic, and Mystery.
Myth, Magic, and Mystery. I can tell you that it's surrounded by tremendous archetypal images, figures, and I'm seeing a lot of goddesses and historical elements. What do each of these archetypal items signify? How valuable is each piece to you?
Wow, well, these items really represent a lifetime of collecting just things that held my interest, which is pretty much everything, but particularly things pertaining to evolution and cosmology and history and magic, and most especially the history of the goddess and goddesses. So the big part of the collection is the 360 or so goddess images from throughout history and around the world that's over in those cases. And that was Morning Glory's particular devotion. My late lamented beloved soulmate, after 40 years together, she died a couple of years ago of cancer, and it was really quite a tragic loss. She was truly amazing. The archetypal priestess.
God bless her spirit.
Yes, and she's very much a part of this. All of this was a part of our life, and and our work together, and everything really. So after she died, after wrestling with what to do with the next phase of my life, it seemed like bringing this into a public venue would be the best way to carry on the legacy that we'd created over our time.
I see there's a Russian matryoshka in there.
Oh yeah.
The nesting doll. What does that represent in terms of archetypal power?
Oh well, those guys, the Russian nesting dolls, to me they represent the structure of reality and the universe and everything. I mean, they're wonderful because layer within layer within layer, a dweem within a dweem, as it goes. It's but each of them have their own significance. But that particular one, I'm very fond of for that.
Dream within a dream is Edgar Poe, right?
Well, I was actually quoting the reference with the accent from The Princess Bride, but yes, it is.
A lot of your books are available on Amazon, at bookstores, and basically, aside from Harry Potter, which is obviously a fictional, beautiful world, you are in essence a real wizard.
Well, yes.
That is a very rare thing to actually sit before a real wizard, and I was driving to Santa Cruz, where your magical academy is, and shop. And I tell my friends I'm going to visit the Wizard of Cruz because it matches the Wizard of Rock.
That's very funny.
Now, your books include the Grimoire, the Companion for the Apprentice Wizard, and many other books. How many books have you released altogether?
Oh boy, I'd have to think about that because there's ones that I've written completely. There's ones that I've contributed chapters or major sections to, and there's quite a few that I've got lengthy interviews and involvement in. There's over 100 books that I know of that I'm a part of, or I'm in, and some reference. Of the ones that I've actually written, let me see, there's the Grimoire, the Companion, the Circles and Ceremonies, the Bestiary, the Wizard and the Witch, the Solotopia, and the Persum. So I guess about half a dozen that I've actually written, and others that I've contributed in major ways to.
Now,
I've got several in process right now. I'm working on the one that's most urgent, as I'm co-writing with another person, which always makes it difficult to get them to get their work up to date with it, is called Death, Rites, and Rights. And it will be on, well, death, really. Both elements, the rites and rituals and mythology around death, which is vast and mostly my department, as well as how you deal with death, how you deal with people who are dying, what arrangements you make for them for their last days, for disposition of the remains. Do they get cremated or buried, or or what are the alternatives. It's quite involved. There's a lot of stuff, and most people just don't know any of it. So it's really important.
Wow. Yeah. I was led to help out with death rituals naturally, and it really connects you to a realm of a high priest, and in being there for the spiritual benefit and transition element of whoever you love. I can't wait for that book to come out. Now, you and we're both wearing lots of silver. What is it about you that prefers silver over gold?
Well, silver is more feminine, obviously, and associated with the moon. Gold is more traditionally masculine and associated with the sun. But really, I've just never acquired gold jewelry, mainly because it's too expensive, you know. And the silver is just so much. My own work is silver. I mean, this is a wedding ring, you know, and I've got a whole lot of my jewelry is out there that I've made dozens of designs of jewelry.
In the shop here?
Oh, yeah.
Wow, so you're a jeweler as well.
Yeah, I make jewelry, I make statues, figurines. I'm taking a whole bunch of stuff to Starwood next week, so it's what I've got. All the mess over here is packing up stuff to go. But you can see some of my stuff out in front.
Yes, I and the audience, come to Santa Cruz, come visit the shop.
That's right.
And I didn't know you do jewelry. Your rings are beautiful. For
Thanks.
me, silver is a cleansing, purifying thing. Sometimes gold can bring jealousy and envy. Silver purifies, so I do. Even if I do have some gold items, but I still prefer silver. Ooh, I'm smudging. Now, also you have a sapphire and an amethyst. We're both wearing amethyst, and you're wearing a sapphire. Mm-hmm. What do these stones represent for you?
Well, the amethyst is good for just basic focusing and grounding and kind of connecting. And this was something that Morning Glory and I shared a lot of this. Both of these pieces had belonged to her. This is her wedding ring, and this had been her pentacle. So I've taken them on just as a part of that association with her. And this here is the star sapphire is the ring for the gray school. We have class rings, and it's the sapphire. Each color, there are 16 different stones that are used for the 16 departments, and this one is for general wizardry. But the star part of it was part of my, and Morning Glory and I each had one as the founders and headmaster and headmistress of the school there. And we've always had a fondness for the star sapphire. We had some star obsidian is what we also had as our family stone and for the Ravenheart family, but I don't have a piece of that right now.
And what about emerald? What does that represent? Is it one of the 16 stones you have?
Well, I don't have any emerald actually myself, so I can't really say too much about that.
Now, when we talk about death, is death a living thing?
Well, it's part of the cycle of life, and we're coming to understand so much more about the nature of consciousness in the universe, especially through the leading edge of quantum theory these days, that there really is no exact discontinuity per se. The very nature of the cosmos at its deepest level is consciousness. We can almost see that our life here is like inhabiting an avatar in a gaming program or Second Life or something. You know, we don't really fully understand the full nature of our reality. There's so many mysteries that have completely eluded explanation. Even basic things like gravity, magnetism, electricity. You know, we don't really fully understand these. We have theories that explain how they function in some way, but exactly what creates them and causes them, let alone consciousness. You know, it's just like there is nothing that we can analyze scientifically that can get at it. You know, you can take apart something all the way down and you'll never find a single bit of it, and yet is the very essence of it. So death would seem to be just a returning to whatever state we were in before we entered into here, perhaps just withdrawing our little projection into this universe back to where it came from.
Do you still communicate with your love?
I do very much, especially through dreaming. She was a dreamer. She was really a dream walker, and we did a lot of our communication with dreams. How we found each other in the first place was through dreams that we had 2,000 miles apart. And so I very frequently have dreams in which she and I come together and kind of catch up with stuff. What's interesting of these is that there's a full awareness of the state in these. These aren't just like some kind of dream we're out there. It's like, oh, here you are, you're dead. Yes, I'm dead. Okay, that's fine. We get that. Now what? You know, where are we going from here? Well, there's some things we have to talk about and deal with, and that's okay. That's great. And it's really just amazing. It's like having an experience with her physically present.
Virtual reality.
Yeah, it's a virtual reality. Exactly.
And do you sometimes look forward to going to bed just for that?
Well, you know, I don't really think of it quite like that. I mean, it's not like this happens every night. There are lots of reasons I look forward to going to bed. Some of them because it's just been a long day and I'm really beat. And there are times when I feel particularly in tune, or I'm seeking a communion or a message, or have work to do in the dreaming. I do a lot of my visionary work. I'm an artist, and I derive a lot of my inspiration from images that I get, that I bring back from the dreaming. You know, the symbol of the Gray School, the Pencadeuse, which is on the cover of the grimoire up there that you saw, was something from the dreaming.
It looks kind of like a medical symbol in a way.
Well, it's the medical symbol of the caduceus is embedded into it, but it's not really. It's an interesting twist, the history of that. It's not really the medical symbol that the people see. The traditional medical symbol was supposed to be the staff of Asclepius, who is regarded as the founder of medicine, but that was just a single serpent around a staff. The image that they adopted is actually the caduceus of Hermes, which has a completely different meaning in history. But these two got conflated in during, I think it was World War I, when they had officially adopted it, and they just picked the wrong symbol, and now it's totally associated with medicine.
What does the serpent represent medically? Anti-poison?
Well, the wisdom, the immortality is probably the major part of it. Historically, the story that of Asclepius is really where it begins, and that occurred during the first plague of Athens. That was a very famous plague, and the people came to Asclepius because he was the wise old wizard, and they said, "Hey, we're all dying from the plague. What do we do?" And he said, "Well, do exactly what I tell you." And they said, "Okay." He said, "Go out into the countryside and find snakes. Get all the snakes you can possibly find and bring them into the city and turn them loose under your houses." And they go, "Okay, if you say so." And so they did, and of course the snakes ate the rats, and that ended the plague. And that was the beginning of his fame. He was eventually deified. His temples became the first hospitals, or the temples to Asclepius. And so he became the father of medicine for this. And so the staff with a serpent around it was his symbol, essentially. But we also have associations of the serpent with immortality, like in the Legend of Gilgamesh, where Gilgamesh has to go retrieve a branch from the Tree of Life, which by now is submerged under the waters of the Persian Gulf, which is where the Garden of Eden was. And he dives down, he brings it back up, and he's really beat from the dive, and he lays down on the shore, takes a nap, and when he wakes up, a snake has crawled out of the ground and seized it and disappeared into a hole. And so snakes achieved immortality. The shedding of the skin is seen to be part of that. So they've been associated with the healing arts throughout all of history and mythology.
Now, you have a Church of All
Worlds.
All Worlds.
Church of All Worlds.
Now, it started from a science fiction novel that you loved, right?
It was inspired, certainly, by that, yes.
Can you describe I have the original green hardcover of that novel.
Oh, do you? Oh, yes, that's quite a piece with the fallen caryatid on the cover of it.
Can you talk about the name of that book, what that book did for you, for your mind?
Certainly. Well, I've always loved science fiction. I mean, when I was a little kid, my first reading was children's versions of the Greek myths. And that led me into mythology and fairy tales and fantasy, which led into science fiction. And as soon as the science fiction book club started offering books to kids in school, I was a subscriber. And I got all those old classic things from the very beginning. During the 1950s, Robert Heinlein, the author of Stranger in a Strange Land, did a series of 12 juveniles. And they were sort of the Harry Potter novels of that time, or for my generation. because each one of them, the protagonist would be about a year older, but it wasn't the same person. That was the difference. But you'd have these wonderful stories of kids, and they would be older and older as you got older. But I happened to be that age. It was like if you started reading Harry Potter when you were 11, and you completely relate to the whole sequence. So when these first came out, that was me. I was that, so I totally identified. And these were all lessons. They were all lessons about what it means to be fully human in the deepest level. But only science fiction can really offer you that answer, because you have to have a basis of comparison. And in compared to what? So with science fiction, you can have alien races and civilizations and cultures and people, and you can say, well, what does it mean to be human in this context? Kind of what Star Trek was all about, that same kind of an idea. Well, I was, if you've seen the movie Pleasantville, that was, well, it's about high school in the late 50s. And every story about high school takes place in the 50s, in those days. I mean, the Archie comic books, the Happy Days, all these things, there was something about the late 50s that sort of encapsulated the whole idea of high school. Pleasantville is a terrific movie about that. It shows that transition of that era. And that was me. I was in high school in suburbia, and it was just like in those TV shows, Father Knows Best and Leave It to Beaver and all those things. That was how it was. And then I went off to college in 1961, the beginning of the 60s. And so I was embedded in that whole 60s revolution and culture. In 1961, Heinlein's next novel was Stranger in a Strange Land. It came out October of that year as the selection of the month for the Science Fiction Book Club. And in that one, he took things to a whole new level. He took them to the level where the protagonist addresses, well, issues nobody had ever talked about in science fiction. Sex, for example, relationships, politics, religion. Nobody had ever talked about that stuff before in that same context. And the theme is that a child born on another planet is raised by alien beings because his own people were all killed. It was, they used Mars as the example. So the first expedition to Mars crashes, everybody dies, but one of the women was pregnant, and the baby was saved by these ancient, wise Martian race who raised this kid up. But they don't know anything about humans or what kind of culture he is. They're not even trying. It's like we go to the jungle and bring back a baby chimpanzee and raise it up in human culture and teach it to speak with hand language and make things and do tools and wear clothes. What happens if you then send that chimp back to the jungle to interact with the other chimps? And that's what the story was. 20 years later, another expedition successfully goes to Mars, and now the kid is 20 years old. They bring him back to Earth, and he sees everything from a totally different perspective. I mean, he's physically human, but culturally he's far more. And many of us could relate, many of us felt like we were changelings. That's sort of the draw of things like the Harry Potter stories, is that maybe you really are from somewhere else, or your parents are not who you think they are. Maybe we really were dropped off by a flying saucer to be here. I mean, I used to go out in the backyard with a flashlight and try to signal the flying saucers to come and take me home, It was that kind of a thing. The whole story of the ugly duckling is like that. So the search for our own kind becomes a major quest at a point in our life. For those of us who feel that we're not exactly belonging where we find ourselves growing up. And Stranger in a Strange Land, it did that. It looked at everything that we take for granted in our culture from this outside perspective. And it was profound. But it did not provide answers. That wasn't the point. What it did was that asked the kind of questions that nobody had imagined to ask before. Does it have to be like this? What possible alternatives could be? Could there be a better way? What about such and such? Do we have to do it this way? And when he looked at things like religion and sexuality, these things, the different perspectives were profound. And they were very influential to me. And in the story, the character, Valentine Michael Smith, is the name of the protagonist. He ends up founding a church to teach the kind of wisdom that he had acquired from his experience on another world. And he calls it the Church of All Worlds. And there's a note that Heinlein has in this where he says that religion is a null area in the law. If you can establish a religion and get it totally recognized, you can pretty much do anything you want. And we went, wow. So I followed the prescription. It tells exactly how to go about it. You know, you go and you get a ministerial certificate from some small Bible college somewhere that just, you know, isn't a big deal. And you file this particular paperwork and you do this particular stuff, and we went through the process and we incorporated legally. Now, we started the Church of All Worlds really right after reading the book. My first water brother, my friend Lance Christie, and I, we shared water. And sharing water is the primal sacrament in the book, in the Church of All Worlds, and as well in the real life, because water is that one essence that unites all life. All living shares water. That's what we have. And water is not separate. All the water is the same water. The water on Earth has all come from space, all of it, from comets and things over millions and millions of years. And it's universal. It's one of the very first compounds that appeared in the universe is water, you know, and hydrogen and oxygen combined. And it's everywhere. It's older than the stars, older than the galaxies. And yet it's a part of us. It's a part of our world. So it's really a great symbol, especially now that we're in the age of Aquarius. So it's particularly cool. So the sharing of water is an affirmation of that kinship, basically. And there's many levels. You can take it to the deepest level of lifelong bonding, or you can just pass it around a circle and say, well, we're all part of the circle of life. But the deeper level takes it to like beyond marriage, beyond kinship, into this very deep, intense thing. And Lance and I did that on April 7th, 1962. And we pledged ourselves to dedicate our lives to actualizing these principles and ideas and ideals that we had encountered in our reading and our studies and in our life, and the conversations we had late into the night, and the kind of questions asked in this book and many others. And a few years later, after having it be several years kind of a secret society, we'd find somebody else that we thought was cool. We'd turn them on to the book, you know, and if they really liked it and they come back, we'd say, well, I offer you water. So it kind of grew in our college years to a group of about 100. And after we left and went off to graduate school, we entered into a kind of a conversation. Should we continue this being sort of a secret underground brotherhood, fraternity, and sisterhood as well, of course, or take it public? And we went round and round about that. And as usually the case with us over the years, we decided to do both. So Lance was selected to head up the underground aspect of it, which initially became the Atlan Foundation and is currently the Association for the Tree of Life, because the acronym ATL is an Aztec word, Atl, that means water. But it also has the esoteric meaning of the ancient lost homeland of our ancestors, i.e. Atlantis. So it was a pretty cool term. Mm-hmm. And we studied ancient language. We have used a lot of those kind of things. We'd pull something out of, oh, wow, here's a term in ancient Sumerian. That's really cool, you know. And so we did both. And I was selected to head up the Church of All Worlds and to take it public. Lance and I were Kirk and Spock to each other for our entire life.
Were you Kirk or Spock?
I was the Kirk. He was the Spock. Yeah. All the way down the line. It was quite uncanny. And we had just a wonderful lifetime bond. He died of cancer a few years back, 2010, at Samhain, pancreatic cancer. Cancer has been a plague of our generation, and that's another whole story I could talk about, but it's a little bit beyond this.
Have you met the author, the original Robert?
Oh, yes.
How was that? How many times, and how was that experience meeting Robert?
Well, I only got to meet him personally once, but we corresponded for years. As it turned out later, I found out that I was the only fan that he corresponded with. He didn't with people. Mostly his wife, Virginia, would just send out a little form letter saying, you know, Mr. Heinlein is busy writing his next book. Thank you for your interest. But because of the Church of All Worlds that I'd created and the newsletter that we had about it and stuff, we entered into quite a wonderful conversation by mail. I've got like 40 pages of our correspondence.
Do you think you'll ever make a book out of that?
Well, I've thought about it. I published some of it in Green Egg, which is our magazine, mm-hmm. and I've had a few requests for the copies of it for various Heinlein biographies and archives, but. You know, perhaps, I mean, someday I'd love to do more books. One of them would be a whole book on the Church of All Worlds.
Yeah.
which is quite a story.
And is for the Church of World Lords, is there a Bible of sorts?
Well, I mean, Strange Land is as close as it comes to a scripture in that sense, but we know it's a science fiction book. We don't think that this really happened, you know. I mean, it happened, 60 years ago in a future that hasn't yet come to pass, which is really fascinating, you know.
What would be the objective of the church, if you were to describe it so that people would...
Well, our basic mission statement is about working towards the evolution of humanity to the next stage of it, to awakening Gaia and uniting her children through global consciousness and a community of stewardship and so on. The idea of the Church of All Worlds, and why the name is so cool, is that it's intended to be inclusive, whereas most groups and churches are meant to be exclusive. It's all about those people over there are not us, and they're heretics, they're infidels, they're non-believers. And our approach is that everybody who wants to come here is welcome.
Beautiful.
Which is very different. And of course, we only have one rule. A lot of these things have lots and lots of rules, but ours is we just have one in the Church of All Worlds, and it's be excellent to each other. And yes, that's from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which was quite excellent.
And also the Bible, your neighbor, right? Same thing.
Well, yes, right.
Now tell me, dealing with, did Robert ever attend any of did he ever come to the church?
No, he didn't get out much. He lived in Bonnie Doon, which is where I live right now, which is very interesting. And I'd always hoped to visit him, but my life and his never intersected. He didn't travel to go to science fiction conventions, and I was going to all the World Cons in those days. Finally, he did go to one sometime in, late 70s or so. It was a big special deal to have him there, but I wasn't able to attend. I was, totally in a different place at that time. Well, I met him personally, Morninglad and I met him personally at one of his book signing travels that he was going around promoting blood drives, which became a big thing with him. He wrote the whole article on blood in the encyclopedia, the World Book Encyclopedia, for instance. And he was really promoting that. And he said that when he was in the hospital, he got lots of blood transfusions, and they were from anonymous donors. So as far as he was concerned, anybody who gave blood was a blood brother. As far as he knew, he had their blood in his system.
Now, tell me, there was recently a version that came out, the unedited...
Oh my God, yes. Oh.
No.
Don't read that. Well, you can read it only if you've read the original. But
okay.
The original...
Read both, but first the original.
Absolutely, because see, and I have correspondence with him that utterly refutes what his wife Virginia said in the introduction to the later edition, and it's unfortunate because
sometimes those things they change over time. Was your correspondence after, or you know what I mean? Was it more recent?
Well, he died in '88, so
yeah.
My correspondence obviously was all in the '70s, pretty much. And then I disappeared into the mountains for a decade. And then when I came back out again and we started publishing Green Egg, I was all set to send him the new issue, because we'd resurrected it and catch him up with stuff. And he died just before it came out. It was at Beltane of 1988. And
that's interesting. That's right when I got to this country.
Oh, is it? Wow. Well, that's when he died. It was really sorry. But he died really well, I must say. My goodness, he wrote his last book, To Sail Beyond the Sunset. He wrapped it up, tied all the loose ends together, had all the different characters interacting from all the stories, and he finished it off with a great line, and we all lived happily ever after. And then the box of the first editions came from the publisher, and he opened the box up and checked it out and loved the cover, went upstairs to take a nap, and never woke up. Now that is a good way to go. That is a good way to go. Complete your work, see the final last bit, yep, and then be done.
Amazing. Do you like that book?
Oh yeah, I love it. But I like almost all of his stuff. I just find it fascinating. The different perspectives that he brings, it's just so wild.
So the newer version, the unedited one, is just...
It's the unedited one. See, he did the editing. I have this correspondence with him. I asked him, because there had been a rumor that the original book had been much longer. And he wrote back and he said, yes, I'd worked on that one over a decade. I'd been keeping notes on little 3x5 cards and things, and I put together a bunch of stuff and tried out a bunch of plot lines, and some of them didn't go anywhere, some of them did better. And then when it was finally time to actually publish it, when its time had come, the world was ready for it and could handle a book like this, then I went through and did a final editing, tightened it up, and that's my work. That's the editor's copy, you know. And the thing that's interesting is in the process of editing it, he took some of the conversations that really didn't really go anywhere but looked like they ought to, and rethought them and brought them together to coalesce. The most important one was the most transformative thing ever. It was what his definition of love in the book, in the original edition, as that condition in which another person's happiness is essential to your own, laid the foundation for the entire sexual revolution of the 60s.
Wow.
I mean, this came out the same year the pill was invented. And the combination of those two things, there was lots and lots of reviews and discussions of the impact that book had back in those days, which the world has largely forgotten, but I still have copies of these. It was really considered to be, a world changer on so many levels.
As we wrap up the interview, I'm going to ask you two more questions and a follow-up to this, because I know. The follow-up is, if you could say anything to Robert right now, and he would hear you, what would you say?
Well, I'd probably like to say, how do you think we're doing? With this, we've taken your ideas and questions and carried them forward 60 years from when you originally put this stuff together. And how you doing? Now I'm in the position to get that because I am regarded as the founder of the pagan movement. Since it was 50 years ago, in 1967, I became the first person to claim the term pagan as a self-identifier. And therefore, everything from that point forward that is identified as pagan, is directly derived from me. And now people are talking about, well, it's 50 years, how are we doing? And I think one of the major reasons I get invited to attend all these festivals and events is so I can say, good job, kids, you're doing great, carry on.
The way
and I
Wizard
feel that
would,
way. Right, exactly.
You're the go-to.
Yeah.
Now, two more questions. Pentacles and, Stars of David. Obviously, they come from different places. We're talking about paganism, and then there's the Jewish religion. Do you believe that the Ring of Solomon, the one that was supposed to communicate with the other side and to build the temple, I've spoken to several rabbis. Some of them have told me it was definitely the Star of David, and some of them told me it was a pentagram. I was wondering, obviously they're different symbols, and pentagram is different the way you reverse it, but the power, the energy that comes in and out of it, how do they differ from those two symbols?
Well, unicursive sigils like that, they really begin with a pentagram, because you can't really do much with a square. You could make a square out of it, but you can't really do anything else with it. You can make either a cross or a square. When you get a pentacle, when you get 5 points, you can make a pentagon or a pentagram. And with each point you add to it, the design can become more complex. From a magical point of view, the tracing the lines is like a mandala that leads your consciousness and your thought into deeper levels, because it has no end, but it's all these angles and goes back and forth. So a proper name could be said a pentangle. You've got the pentagon and the pentangle, and in closing them in within a circle makes a pentagram that we have traditionally. The pentagram as a symbol was adopted by Archimedes, who founded the first school of magic. And a part of it was to represent the elements. There were the 4 elements of matter. Well, the 4 states of matter: solid, liquid, gas, and plasma, that he called earth, air, fire, and water. But they're the states of matter. They're not elements like we think of chemical elements. And then there's the 5th, the animating force of spirit. And the pentagram is a perfect symbol for that. But more than that, from the point of view of mathematics, if you unroll a pentagram, just roll it down and then drop a line at each point, it follows a Fibonacci sequence, which is really quite fascinating. It's the only geometrical figure that does that. And the Fibonacci sequence gives you the formula of phi, which is the formula that describes all the operations of nature. The spiraling form from the galaxy to the DNA and everything in between.
Now, Is there some kind of a concept when, if the star was to move in one direction, it would bring something in, pull it, and the star in a different direction would push or give something out?
Well, whether the pentagram is seen as point up or point down is generally considered significant for different purposes and different reasons. I haven't heard it as a in the sense of a repulsor or attractor structure exactly. That's an interesting concept there. It's used as a protective sigil. Although a better one is the septagram, which is the one that John Dee used, and really just an absolutely perfect protective sigil. But it's a basic protective sigil, and it's often worn that way and used that way. Whether people wear it on their body to protect themselves against any untoward invasions of any sort, or whether they put it up in their windows as a sigil to protect their homes or spaces. So that's mostly how it's used, as a protective sigil. There's a theory that malevolent entities, what they call demons and stuff like that, they're not really beings or entities exactly. They're more like computer viruses. They're programs. They just run. They don't have any consciousness or sentience or agenda. They just run. And they're got a real serious case of OCD. So that if you give them something to run in that they can't get out of, they just get stuck there. So it sort of becomes a trap. And so pentagrams and heptagrams and things like that work for that. The unicursive sexagram seems to have been created by Aleister Crowley. Nobody seems to have thought of that beforehand. At least we don't have any ancient representations of it, which is kind of interesting. But this is why you throw rice at people after a wedding, for example, is so that the evil spirits will get caught up trying to count all the little grains of rice and totally lose track of the couple who disappears off on their honeymoon.
I never knew that.
Yeah, that's the theory behind it.
That's fantastic.
Oh yeah. Magical thinking. It's a whole realm of stuff.
Yeah, you said some fantastic things, and you're a wonderful storyteller, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
When you were speaking about two things previously in this interview, I just got lost in your. Usually, I'm in full awareness of the interview, but I just got lost in your storytelling. Last question for this session, for this interview, is magnetism. You know, I have a film that I've been working on for a long time about Rasputin, and me and my friends, certain ones, they have certain abilities, and I'm just wondering, what does the term magnetism mean to you, and how do you use it?
Well, the term, it depends on how you're using it, of course. You can talk about the magnetism of a physical magnet or lodestar, or which I think you're referring to is like personal magnetism and psychic magnetism and that kind of stuff. But it means attraction, the ability to attract something to it. And that's always been regarded as a magical ability. The power of a magnetic personality, which we now tend to use the word charisma for, but it downplays it a bit, can be enormously powerful. It's how people rule the world with this. You know, something about their presence and their power is so compelling. And this is one of the things that one can learn and study in the Gray School. We have classes on things like the voice, that people can use. It just makes everybody go, yes, sir, and follow right where you go. That kind of thing. It's also a basis of hypnotism, and that was how it was used by people like Rasputin and Mesmer and people like that, who were the pioneers of hypnosis. And that can be very compelling if you can master that power, that compulsion, and the voice, and the eyes, and the whole bit, which is all doable. I mean, you can all learn this stuff. It's amazing what you can get people to do, and what they will believe. That's the most amazing thing. You can tell just utter bullshit to somebody, and they will utterly believe it if you have that kind of a power about you.
Or you can heal them by self-initiation.
Right,
anyway.
Because it's compelling. It conveys belief. Your own belief in your stuff radiates with such strength that it resonates with someone else, and they believe it too. If you believe it, they believe it. So there's that resonance factor of magnetism.
Do you think magnetism contributed to you finding your love?
Well, in a sense, both of us were certainly putting out, looking for each other, very much. But it had much more to do, I think, with us reaching a deeper place, that we were communing through other layers in the dreaming, really. I mean, she dreamed of me 2 years before she met me, for instance, and I'd had her in the back of my dreams. I'd keep having this mysterious presence, and very much of an association with the goddess. Part of my coming to understand and relate to the goddess, which was a profound revelation in my life that took place in 1970, beginning with an acid trip at the total eclipse of the sun in the spring, and culminating with another amazing visionary experience in September of that same year, was also the time that I started seriously getting turned on to and studying the whole history of the goddess. Robert Gray's White Goddess, Eric Newman's The Great Cosmic Mother. Some of these things came to my attention. I mean, I knew about goddesses from studying mythology, of course, but the idea of the goddess, a great, powerful female anima mundi, the spirit of the universe, all that stuff, took a little while to sink in, and the acid helped a lot for that. And in that awareness of the primal female force of nature, the anima mundi, really, the spirit of the world, was the connection through which I met Morning Glory. But she'd been sort of the village witch in Eugene, Oregon, as growing up, and was just desperately looking for her people, because she was just all alone out there. And nice little hippie town, lots of nice people and stuff, but nobody quite like her. And she had this dream, and in the dream she was attending some gathering of magical people, and she's walking along, and this wizard comes walking towards her, and she hears the voice of the goddess saying, "This is the man that you were seeking. Follow him, and he will lead you into the life you wish, that you seek." And she said, the way she used to describe it, she said she cut the picture out and framed it, and memorized it. And then a couple of years later, she heard about this gathering, and it was the 3rd annual Gnostic Aquarian Festival in Minneapolis. It was sponsored by Llewellyn, and I was invited to be a keynote speaker because of the writings I've been putting out over the past couple of years on Gaia, on the Theogenesis writings. I was the one who was first writing about the planet being a single biological entity, a single living organism. And this was several years before James Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis stuff became popular. But this had permeated the whole pagan movement. Everybody was like, whoa, this is incredible. And it unified the whole pagan community with a common theology. And so I got invited to attend this conference. It was the first time I had been invited to go out and talk about stuff. Now I do it a lot, And so she hitchhiked across the country to attend this event, which was at fall equinox of 1973. And she signed up for my workshops, and we met in that context and fell madly in love, and all of that stuff. It was really huge. And she ended up coming home with me. But while we were waiting for the car to come around, because we had a bunch of us piled into a van, she was standing out in front, or we were both standing out in front of the lobby, where they had the tables that had the program books, which she had missed as she'd come through, and she'd missed it in the mail as she'd been hitchhiking, and hadn't seen the program. So while we're waiting, she picks up one of the program books, and she's leafing through it to find out what it said about me. And there is this picture of me, which was the picture from the dream. And she looked at this, she looked at me, and she said, this picture of you, you don't look quite like the picture. When was this taken? I said, well, it was a publicity photo I had about 2 years ago. So that was it. That kind of did it. And our whole life was like that. Our whole life was bounded with amazing synchronicities. And I just wish we could have had another 40 years, because it was amazing.
Yeah. For me, my soulmate is actually somebody who's passed on, who is a family member, and she was my greatest inspiration. So we had 36 years together from my birth. So
wow.
It was. I understand the feeling of that is there's nothing like it.
No.
Nothing can come near it, and it lasts forever.
That's right. And it's still there. I mean, the connection is still there. It's I miss her physically, though. I just really, really do, because in all those years, we slept together, and held each other through everything, and had all kinds of adventures and wonders, and we were just so attached to each other. I expect to roll over in bed at night and have my arms around her and not.
Yeah. Mine was, of course, platonic, but the power is extreme.
It is.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
Oh my goodness, there's, I guess one thing is to say that this year I will be 3/4 of a century old. So I guess it's some kind of a watershed of some sort, and I'm still here and still keeping busy.
7 and 5 are some of my favorite numbers. 3 is my favorite.
Well, they're good. They're good. They are. Yes. Well, and stay tuned. I've got books I'm trying to write. I've got work to do, journeys to take, and some stuff that could have a really significant impact, which I would love to be able to talk more about, but I can't quite at this point, really.
Yeah,
but
you got to reserve that energy.
Right, but you'll be hearing more about it.
Can you share some of your websites so the audience can visit?
Certainly. Well, the school is greyschool.com. That's GREY school.com. And it's awesome. That's really probably my biggest ongoing project is the School of Wizardry. It's huge. We've got 370 students in 50 countries around the world, over 480 classes, a couple dozen teachers, and I am so proud of this. It's just awesome. It's been going on since 2004, so that's really good. And so grayschool.com, you want to see that's my most current. The Church of All Worlds website is caw.org, and if you go to that, you can look up events and find out what events we're holding on our land, which is, we've got this wonderful land, 55 acres up in Mendocino County. That's where Morning Glory is buried. She was buried in a green burial, and the land through her and her burial became designated as an official graveyard for green burials, so it's a legal cemetery now, which is really quite profound, something we spent a lot of time trying to achieve. You don't have to be cremated. If you don't want to go through the burning times again, you can be planted in the ground and, like her, have an apple tree planted on your grave, as she has. And there's that. The magazine that I've published for many years, Green Egg magazine, you can look that up.
Why Green Egg?
Well, there's lots of reasons, and different stories were given every time somebody asked. The most logical one being that it's a symbol for the earth, the earth, a great green egg that is waiting to be hatched with infinite potential inside. You don't know what's inside until it hatches, kind of stuff. So it's a great metaphorical concept. But it originally derived from the fact that back in those days, we're talking 1968, the only means of producing multiple copies was a ditto machine, which used this really cheap kind of a weird ink stuff that came in just a few colors. It came in what was supposed to be black, but just was really a pale gray, and a fairly acceptable purple, and a kind of a pale washed out red, but it was still more red than pink, and a pretty nice green. So we decided that we would put out different levels of newsletters for the different levels of the church, because the church was organized in 9 circles to represent what in those days was thought to be 9 planets. Now the outermost one is the Oort cloud, which is cool too. But and moving inward, you move in. So those were set up in 3 rings, because we figured it would be a 3-ring circus of 3 circles each. So we designed newsletters for each of these. So for the innermost one, we call it the Violet Vision, and we printed that one in the purple ink. And for the general membership level, for the Scion level, we only use the red, and we call it the Scarlet Flame. And for the outermost one, we just use the green ink, and we call it Green Egg. And the egg in that means came from a reference in the novel Stranger in a Strange Land. If I am only an egg, I'm just a beginner here. So that's the whole story.
Lots of meaning.
Lots of meaning. Layers and layers.
Thank you so much, Wizard Oberon Zell, for being on the Archetypal Mosaic. And again, please check out the Wizard's school, church, magazine, and multiple books available on Amazon and at your local booksellers.
And of course, I have a website as well, oberonzell.com, and I'm on Facebook.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining the Archetypal Mosaic. Be blessed.
Blessed be.